I'm Julie-Ann Goode, and this is Psych One-on-One. He's doing a documentary, and his name is Lee Godden. He is a producer and director of Where's My Food, which we're going to be discussing. Lee founded Telsius Productions, LLC in 2002, and since then, the company has built a proven track record of making award-winning, entertaining, socially conscious films and television programs. Thank you, Lee. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you for coming on. This should be an interesting topic. I love documentaries, and a lot of the restaurant owners have a difficult time, especially employing quality people, correct?
Yeah, that's right. There are a lot of people working in the food industry. To be specific, 10% of all Americans work in the food industry, believe it or not. It's a huge percentage. And of those, you're talking about 1/5 of those workers are waiters and waitresses. The rest are behind the scenes. These are the cooks and the busboys. For half of us, we have worked in a restaurant. And for a third of us, of all Americans, that was our first job,
right,
working in a restaurant.
That's my first job.
It was mine.
Yes.
One of the assumptions that people have is that servers do just fine. You know, they get an hourly wage and they get tips, and they probably don't pay their taxes on their tips, which of course is wrong. One fact is that servers, that is, millions of them, live below the poverty level, below the federal guidelines for what is living in poverty. So oftentimes, the people who bring us our food in restaurants, they go home to a house that is not very nice, and they and their family often go hungry themselves. It's something we don't think about. They typically have no health insurance. They typically have no paid sick days. So when they are sick, when a server gets sick, they will come into work. Why? Because that's the way the system has set it up. If they don't go to work, they don't get paid. If they have a cold or the flu that lasts for 5 days, they are going to lose a lot of money by not coming into work.
And then they're going to pass the germs on to the consumer.
It happens all the time. It actually happens all the time. So when these facts are raised to people's level of awareness, I think that's going to spur some positive change, and really that's what the movie is all about. I don't want to paint a completely negative picture. This is a voluntary occupation, isn't it? I mean, nobody's forcing you to stay as in your current job. Anybody in America is free to move from job to job, and some skilled fine dining servers actually do make a very nice income, very nice middle-class income, enabling them to buy a house and a car. But most servers, of course, don't have those types of fine dining jobs. Most servers work for the Red Lobsters, the Denny's, the Olive Gardens, the Applebee's, Macaroni Grills, and so forth. And if you average all servers paid together, including tips, across America, it's about $10 an hour, just under $10 an hour. If you multiply that times 40 hours a week, which no server works 40 hours a week, very seldom, you get about $20,800 a year, and that's not much money.
Right, and you especially can't live on that kind of a wage when you're living in California. Can you tell us about one or two of the more interesting people that you interviewed for your documentary?
Yeah, we've been lucky enough to have some great waiters and waitresses that have agreed to be interviewed. Of course, when we put the call out, so to speak, we were flooded with people who wanted their story told, but we had to be very selective because we just can't introduce that many characters into a 90-minute piece. So we have a number of very interesting stories from servers that represent a broad spectrum, from the low end of the income chain to the high end, people who've really suffered economically, and people who are thriving as servers. So we're trying to be as objective as possible. We've also had some great experts who've agreed to be interviewed for the documentary. And Professor Michael Lynn from Cornell University, he's probably America's foremost expert in research of tipping, why we tip, and the socioeconomic and psychological aspects of tipping. We had an activist lawyer sit down with us, Saru Jayaraman, who just wrote a wonderful book, Behind the Kitchen Door, which really exposes some nastiness about the industry. And we have an executive chef and restaurant owner, Chef Schaefer from here in Los Angeles, who sat down with us, and he's an example of somebody running a great restaurant, and his servers stay with him for 15, 20 years. People in the back of the house, the cooks, the bussers, they stay with him for a long time. Why? Because he's doing it right. So we tried to have a really objective approach to this film. Going back to Professor Lynn from Cornell for a moment, he really digs in deep into why we tip. One of the most interesting things that he came up with through his research is that you think that tips are purely a reflection of the quality of the service. And it's really not. If somebody gives you great service, they'll end up getting tipped a little bit more. But it's really not this wide variance. There are so many other factors that go into how much people decide to tip at the end of a meal, and very little of that is actual service quality. So that was a real eye-opener for us.
The psychology behind tipping, did Dr. Lynn get into that in any kind of detail for this?
Yeah, he really did. One cornerstone comment that he made is the primary reason that people tip is to avoid disapproval from the server. It's a staying within the norm. In other words, doing what's right. And we as humans are really driven by doing what is expected of us. And it is expected that consumers will tip after a meal. If you think about it, it's completely voluntary, correct? I mean,
right.
You finish your meal, and you have a full belly, and, that's great. And that steak was $19, great. You could actually pay that and leave if you wanted to. But people don't, by and large. But what they do, they vary tremendously on the amount of tip they leave. We did some MOS interviews, man-on-the-street interviews, where we just interviewed random people all day long, asking how much they tip and so forth. And the range of responses we got was just amazing. Of course, the social norm of tipping in America is between 15 and 20%. And hopefully those who appreciate servers tip more than that. But Professor Lynn points out that a lot of people, including some demographic groups, do not know of the standard tipping norm. Therefore, those demographic groups tip far less. Therefore, servers tend to not appreciate waiting on those demographic groups. And it's a vicious cycle that goes around and around. And, of course, Professor Lynn advocates this educational campaigns, and he's helped launch a couple of those in areas across America, and it's working. When people know what's expected of them, they will tend to tip with the norm. You mentioned it's a difficult job. That's just no exaggeration. You're carrying hot plates on your arm. They're stacked up, weighing quite a bit. I've talked to servers who have cuts. They have leathery skin. They have injuries. They've had to just go to the emergency room. Some issues become chronic. It is not an easy job. You're on your feet. We talked to one young lady who has been serving for 14, 15 years. She talks about not being able to take a bathroom break. Really not so much the management says she couldn't, but just the load of tables that she had, and if she were to take a break, things would fall apart. And so as a result, she's suffered from recurrent kidney infections. So a lot of things that the people aren't aware of.
Right, and the general public is unaware about what the wait staff is going through unless they've been on that side too. It's difficult for the wait staff to have to deal with customers psychologically.
That's exactly right, and you pegged it 100%. Servers have to be, I suppose you could say, amateur psychologists. They have to be able to read an individual, read a couple, read a table. Some people are just high maintenance, and they're going to want iced tea refills every 4 minutes, and they want somebody hovering. Other situations, just the opposite. You see a man or woman come in and engage in a relatively heavy conversation. Maybe you shouldn't pop over there so often and ask how's everything tasting because something's happening at that table. So you really have to be able to read body language, nonverbal communication, eye contact or lack thereof. We had one young man, Mark, a server at a large chain restaurant, and what really gets him is when he goes up to a table with his biggest smile and he says, "Hey, how you doing today?" And the answer is Sprite. The answer is Sprite. He's trying to engage. He's trying to say hello. He's trying to make them happy and make their experience a good one. And the result, sometimes even with no eye contact. The young man I'm speaking about, he's been suffering with HIV for a number of years, paying for his own meds, going on government trial programs to get the medication cocktail he has to take every morning. He'll wake up feeling pretty bad on many mornings, but he puts on that apron, goes to work, and again tries to make everyone feel good. But his little pet peeve is when people don't even look up to him when he says hello.
Yeah, under those circumstances too, I know just being able to get up and get out of bed and have to fake feeling good and then have to go and serve people who want it now and feel that they're obligated to have good service every time, that's got to be really difficult. And to get no kind of human warmth from the customer has got to be disheartening.
It really does. Then again, there's a lot of good stories too. We talked to professional career servers who are doing really well. We had one young man, young by my standards, he's 35. He's actually a Los Angeles school teacher on a part-time basis. But to supplement his income, he serves food, and he actually makes much more money serving food than he does from the county as a teacher. Yeah, a lot of people really think it's a pass-through type of profession. You know, it's something that young people do on their way to getting a degree or hoping for that big break in Hollywood or whatnot. And sure, that's certainly a percentage. But there are a lot of full-time professional servers who approach it, I will say, in the European way, which is to say that, you know, in a lot of European countries, being a waiter is considered a position that you become an apprentice and then a senior apprentice, and you get more responsibility, and then you become a full practitioner and a journeyman, and it's a very honored profession. You don't see that too much over here in the States.
No, that is a very different way of approaching it. I never knew that. What's one of the darkest sides of the restaurant industry that you've run into making this documentary?
Well, you know, the dark side really came to light when we interviewed Saru Jayaraman, who wrote the book Behind the Kitchen Door. We interviewed her just an hour or two before she was on HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher television show. Her book is doing very well. She really is spending her life, her career, fighting for the rights of servers, restaurant workers, I should say, some of whom are servers, many of whom, perhaps most of whom, are actually the back of the house staff. The way she describes it is there is rampant wage theft, sexism, racism, and of course, as we know, for pretty much all restaurant workers, just no health insurance or paid sick days. Some very dark stories. She's lobbying, she's speaking, she's urging not just the government, but customers. She's urging customers to check which restaurants treat their workers well, not just to serve good food, that's important, through her website, which is ROC, the Restaurant Opportunity Center website. She actually will give you a rating, 1-star to 5-star of a restaurant. If you check it out, there's even a cell phone app for it. And before you choose on a restaurant for the evening, you say, well, does this place really treat their employees well? And if they do, patronize it and vote with your pocketbooks.
That's a wonderful way to approach it. That would be great. I hope she succeeds with that. I think that would really start, revolutionizing the industry, making some changes where they need to be made. There's not only the psychological and physical well-being of the employees that need to be taken into consideration, but also us as consumers as to what is coming out on that plate, whether it's sanitary and it's safe.
That's right. That's right.
The lure of having cash when you get done at the end of the day is like, all right, let's go celebrate, let's go party.
That's a real key point, is that, you're serving food and beverage, oftentimes alcoholic beverages, to your customers. You are around alcohol and around partying, woohoo, living it up type customers. This is your work. And sometimes you get a little bit too absorbed in that, and you'll take a few drinks, and you'll start to say, hey, I'm just like my customers. I'm living the high life. But you're not just like your customers. Your customers are in there spending their money. They're typically salaried people, and you've got a budget. You've got to be very careful. And I found that the more successful lifetime servers who are very content with the profession are those that really have found a way to, like I said, go home, bank the money, and just go to work the next day without partying in between.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what kind of response your documentary is going to generate. What do you think is going to happen with it?
I would like to see it take off. I'd like to see it be the center of discussion for a little while. No new media event lasts for more than a blink of a cosmic eye. But if it can raise some eyebrows and create some genuine discussion, I would be delighted. I just think this is a subject that has really not been talked about very much. Again, we talk very much about food in America, and a couple on their way out to eat for dinner may say, tonight I'm only going to have the grain-fed beef and the organic wine, and that's wonderful, and that you're trying to do the right thing, trying to take the green approach to eating out, which is a wonderful thing. So consumers are driving that, but what consumers are not driving right now is what they're not aware of, which is the working conditions and the struggles of a lot of people who work in the restaurant industry. The movie is not centered on that, on the plight, if you will, of food servers, but it certainly touches on it because it's a real and existing condition that needs to be addressed. But objectively, we also look at the fact that this is a free country. People can change their professions, change their jobs, and a lot of people really thrive and do well as waiters and waitresses.
So what is your main theme that you want to get across to the general public?
That you are being served by a stranger and yet a fellow human. So when you go out to eat, take a moment, take a breath, engage with your server, perhaps ask how their day is going, and enjoy the experience. Make it an experience. The reason you have a professional waiter or waitress serving you is because they are there to make your experience as joyful and delicious as possible. When you go out to eat in an establishment where there's waiters and waitresses, this is not fast food. This is not McDonald's where you're expected to deliver your order within 60 seconds. If you really are looking for that, then maybe you should go to a McDonald's. But if you're going to an establishment where there's wait staff, just relax. Engage with the server. Eye contact is great. And I guarantee you'll walk away from that restaurant feeling not just full of good food, but full of some good human spirit as well.
Right, and you've made somebody else's day a little bit better who's not making a great wage.
That's right.
I think that's something that we all need to take into consideration is, again, it's really difficult work. It's really hard on a person's body and their psyche. Just to be treated as a human being instead of, a scapegoat for somebody who's having a bad day is huge.
That's what makes us human, I believe. That's what separates us from everything else on this wonderful planet. So be human, be kind, and be good to your neighbors and be good to your servers.
That's great. I agree highly. What do you want people to take away from Where's My Food?
Go to the website, where'smyfood.com. Click on the page. It says, keep me informed of the progress. If people want to contribute, we are absolutely taking donations right now. Making a film of any sort requires a tremendous amount of capital, not to mention time. I'm putting a couple of years of my life into this project because I believe in it, and we have some key investors on board. So we want to make this as good a movie as possible. So if people want to become part of it from a production point of view, then we really encourage them. There's a donation page on the website, and of course every donation receives a special gift. So if it's a smallish donation, you'll get a Where's My Food pen. If it's a larger donation, you'll get a movie poster and DVD and so forth, and front row tickets to the premiere as the levels go up. If people are interested in becoming part of it, I really encourage them to reach out to me directly or through the website.
Great. And what feelings and thoughts do you want people to walk away with after they viewed this documentary?
It's a pretty common transaction, and I think it's one that we do a little bit brainlessly sometimes. We don't really think about the people who are bringing our food. If it's a family member, if it's your mother or father or grandparents bringing you a nice plate of warm food at home, you certainly think about the human being bringing that food because that food is brought from a standpoint of love and care and familial closeness. Why does it have to be so different in restaurants? So that's really the emotional goal of the film.
So the next time you go out to eat, make it a win-win situation and everybody walks away happy, correct?
100% correct. Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, we're going to wrap things up. I really want to thank Lee Godden for coming and discussing his documentary, Where's My Food? That's where'smyfood.com, correct?
That's it.
Great.